I am an aerospace medical technician. I am trained for altitude illness, decompression, G-force exposure, and that sort of thing. They assigned me to Groom leg for what was supposed to be a 2-week medical rotation. They told me it was just temporary duty. They told me that I would be support for aerospace testing operations. That's what the paperwork said anyway. I did not get any further explanation than that. Not that I expected one. No one talks specifics out here. Most of the time you are just providing routine physicals and heat injury checks for the test pilots and engineers. Normally, I am stationed at Nellis, but sometimes they pull guys like me to Groom when there is a testing surge or when something goes wrong and they don't want too many of the regulars talking. I knew it was going to be different the second that we landed. The security did not just check our IDs. They took our phones, wallets, anything with a battery or a lens, and gave us tag canvas pouches in return. They walked us through 3 separate screening points just to get to the dormitory housing. I've been through that kind of security before, but never for just a medical support rotation. My schedule said nights, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. That would mean I would be alone in the clinic unless something went wrong. First couple of nights were quiet. I spent most of the time rechecking inventory. I would be making sure a hyperbaric chamber was functional, and I would be sterilizing equipment that had clearly already been sterilized. The base was unusually quiet, even by Groom-like standards. The flight line was dead silent. No sonic booms or any late-night engine tests. There was just stillness and that awful dry wind coming off the desert. On the 4th night, they called me at around 0200. The line was completely secure. The voice said, "Patient inbound to medbay 3. Full precautions. No contact until you are briefed." I waited outside the isolation chamber. 2 men came in wearing full-body PPE. They wore things like tape seams, face shields, and independent oxygen lines. They rolled in a stretcher covered in a heavy gray tarp. One of them told me to follow protocol and walked out without giving me a single patient detail. No chart, no meds, no name. I closed the chamber door behind us and turned on the negative pressure system. When I pulled back the tarp, I froze. The man on the gurney was in his mid-30s. He was roughly built and still wearing most of a flight suit. It had been shredded at the seams and like it had been taken off in a hurry and then put back on. His body was wrong. There was no visible trauma, no blood or anything like that, but his skin looked discolored. It was a blotchy, grayish-purple in places. Looked like he had been underwater too long. His chest rose and fell steadily, though his pupils were fully dilated. He looked like he was in REM sleep, except his eyes were not moving. They were just fixed straight ahead, like he was watching something behind his eyelids. I ran a set of vitals. Heart rate, 48. Respiration, shallow and irregular. Blood pressure, unreadable. I thought the cuff was malfunctioning until I tried it manually. The carot cuff sounds were not normal. They sounded like they were muted. It was almost like there was something absorbing the sound between the vessel walls. His chart came in 2 hours later. It was delivered by an officer with no name tag. Observation only. No pharmacological interventions without express command authorization. That was all it said. I kept monitoring him, hour after hour. At 0400, he started twitching. It was just small movements at first. One leg would jerk and then stop. Then his fingers would curl up and go limp again. It wasn't seizure activity. I've seen seizures. This was like watching someone dream about running. There was a pattern to it. Around 5:30 a.m., he exhaled sharply, and I noticed condensation on the inside of his oxygen mask. But the air was cold in that chamber, too cold for standard humidification. I reached out to adjust the mask. That is when he moved. Not just a twitch, but full movement. His hand came up and gripped my wrist. I yelled for urgent assistance and hit the emergency button. Nothing happened. His eyes opened. Not fully, but just enough that I could see the whites were gone. They were all sclera and no iris, but the most disturbing part was not the lack of color. It was that he looked calm and alert, like he was seeing me through a layer of water. His lips moved. I leaned closer. I will never forget what he whispered. "It isn't one of us." Then he let go, just like that. He laid back and his eyes closed again, as if nothing had happened. They came in 20 minutes later to relieve me. 4 men in the same tape suits. One of them sprayed my arms with a mist that I assume was a disinfectant, but it smelled like nothing I'd ever used before. They did not ask if the patient had moved. They did not ask if anything unusual had happened. They just rolled his stretcher back out and locked down the chamber. That day, I was debriefed in a room with no windows. There was just a single metal table, 2 chairs, and a voice recorder. A woman in a nondescript uniform asked me exactly too many questions to count. They were all procedural. Did I break protocol? Did I touch the patient without gloves? Did I attempt to administer any medication? Did I observe any changes in vital signs? Those were the first questions I faced after they pulled me out of the isolation chamber. The woman who interrogated me wore a plain uniform. It had no insignia and no name tag. Her voice was measured and professional, but there was something about her tone that suggested that these questions were not just procedural. They seemed more like they were tests, like she was searching for a slip. I answered truthfully. No contact without gloves. No meds administered. Changes in vitals. Heart rate was low. Respirations shallow and irregular. Blood pressure unreadable. That was all I said. She did not flinch. Didn't ask me about the twitching, the grip on my wrist, or the whispered words. When I mentioned the patient's eyes, all sclera, no iris, she just tapped her pen and moved on. "Do you understand why you are being quarantined?" she asked next. I didn't, not yet, but the answer came quick enough. You were exposed to an unknown biological agent. Until further analysis is complete, you will remain in isolation. Isolation. That word hit me harder than I expected. The quarantine room was a cell with thick glass walls and a sealed door. No windows, no clock to track the time. I had just a cot, a small metal sink, and a speaker mounted in the ceiling for announcements. The light stayed on 24/7. My only company was a rolling camera and the constant hum of the air filtration system. They brought me food through a hatch in the door. Everything was carefully packaged, and the tray was wiped down with an industrial disinfectant that stung my skin whenever I touched it. My phone and all personal belongings were confiscated. I had no reading materials and no distractions. I was cut off from the world. Days passed by in that sterile box. I kept a journal, scrawling notes with the pen they'd allowed me to keep. Writing was the only thing that kept me sane. The memories of the patient haunted me, the unnatural skin discoloration, the sluggish but deliberate movements. On the 3rd day of quarantine, I heard something. Not through the intercom or the speakers. Something else. A low, wet scraping noise coming from the next room. The quarantine cells were lined up along a corridor, each sealed and soundproofed, but whatever was happening next door was different. The noises were not human. They were muffled voices, but layered underneath was a subtle, irregular rhythm. It was like a throat clearing, but deeper and raspier. Every few minutes, a sharp, wet crack would interrupt the sounds, like bones breaking or something tearing. I banged on the glass. I called out through the speaker, but no response. Later, I learned from whispered conversations between guards that the patient in the next cell was what they called a containment subject, something that did not fit any medical category. I guessed that it was possibly the man I treated, or it could have been another exposed to the same thing. On day 5, 2 men in full biohazard suits entered my cell. They strapped me into a chair, injected me with something that I was told was a standard prophylactic, and hooked me to a portable monitor. I protested, but they ignored me. The sedative was fast-acting. My last conscious thought was the image of the containment subject pounding on the glass its body twitching with unnatural jerks, eyes rolled back like a corpse. When I woke up, I was on a transport plane, flying back to Nellis. I got no explanations and no debrief. At base, I was given a quick medical exam, blood tests, full body scans, and a strict order to avoid contact with anyone outside the medical staff. They kept me under observation for a week before finally clearing me for limited duty. Hey, hope you've enjoyed the story so far. If you want to hear more, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment because it lets YouTube know you like the content and helps more people to see these videos. My next big goal for the channel is 100,000 subscribers, and as a celebration, I will be doing a Q&A video once we hit that goal. Thank you, and back to the stories. It was a normal day. All my brothers and sisters seemed to have somewhere to go or something to do. My parents had to help a friend with something, so it was just me, myself, and I. I wasn't too upset about it. I could always find something to entertain my tween mind, but I was under strict orders not to leave the house under any circumstances, which, as you will all find out, I did not listen anyway. I sat there, thinking about the creek behind our apartments. All the teens went down there to smoke, make out, listen to music, and everything else teenagers do. Because I was still young, I could not go without a friend or sibling. But tonight, I vowed to be a big girl and go hang with all the other kids. I would be back in time, I told myself. Little did I know, I was making a huge mistake. I was about to learn my parents had certain rules, and that people aren't always as they seem. So, I grabbed my boombox. Yes, I'm showing my age a little bit, and headed down the small path through the trees and straight to the creek bank, music blaring, wind in my hair. But then I called out to everyone, and I knew that something was not right. I turned down the music and stood very still. The air, usually cool and crisp this time of year, was thick and smelled metallic. What, I thought, it's Friday. Where is everybody? Then I heard it, a disturbing crying sound. It sounded like a cross between a woman singing and sobbing. It chilled me to the bone. I edged closer to the creek, and then I heard it again. It kind of sounded like it was coming from beneath the water. I took off my shoes and waded in up to my knees, and it got louder. Kelly, Lisa, Dave, Melissa, Howie, Renee, I called out, hoping that some of them were just playing a joke on me. No answer. Oh God, I thought, what is this? And then I saw it. A bright light in front of me, which glowed a bright blue. A motor kicked on, and then I felt something hot crash into my leg. It didn't knock me over, but I did stumble quite a bit, and then the crying sound became a wail. I reached down to my leg and grabbed onto the thing that hit me. It was a light fixture lit up with a small fan-like structure attached to its base. As soon as I lifted it out of the water, I heard a robotic male voice say, "Don't touch us, little girl. We will electrocute you, and then we will have no choice but to leave you here. You should have stayed your disobedient self at home, like your daddy told you. We know everything that goes on here, and your friends, well, some of them might not exactly live here. You see, you don't know anything, so unless you're ready to meet your demise, I suggest you let go of me, turn around, and head home. And no, she isn't hurting. She's one of us. And no, we are not aliens and not demons, and we are not robots. If you get a top clearance, she will find out who and what we are. Now, for the last time, get your hands off me, it yelled, not before I heard it hum and felt some strong vibrations. I just threw him or it away and started running. I snatched my boombox on my way and never looked back, but I was suddenly stopped by, I guess, another one. I felt the harsh smack on the side of my head, saw the bright orange light, and heard an even more disturbing voice say, "You should have stayed home. Tell anyone at all, and I will kill you slowly and painfully. It's a shame you didn't get to meet the one you were investigating. She has a blade." It hissed, clicked, and started wailing right in my ears. I was almost disoriented by the sound, but I kept running. I did not relax until I was safely inside the apartment with the door locked. I didn't even realize I was crying. I checked my leg and face. No bruises or burns, but what the hell was that? I grabbed the phone and started calling neighbors, but the things were right. Some of those kids did not live here. Some of the moms just chalked it up to the neighbors' kids bringing friends home from school. But when I told one of them where I had been tonight, she immediately got silent. I kept saying hello until she finally said, "I'm sending Kelly over. You don't need to be alone." She was over almost as soon as I hung up. She just hugged me and said, "Yeah, I know what you saw, but I don't know what it is." We sat there, waiting, praying that someone would come home and explain everything. I didn't care about getting in trouble. I was just afraid and curious. My brother came home first. He was mad at me, but never ratted me out. He just told me that the government had done some projects and training back there, and some of those kids were young recruits. Every second Friday, third Monday, first Saturday, and fourth Wednesday were testing days, but most of the time, it was just teenagers hanging out. He said that my dad wanted me to know nothing of this because I already have a vivid imagination. Still, to this day, no one knows exactly what those things are, but whatever who or what they are extremely dangerous. I've done some extensive research to try and figure out what I tangled with that night, and I've only found one thing where a girl said she dreamed about seeing something like that outside of her house, but that's still nothing really. Can anyone tell me what that was? Should I just forget that I saw it? Should I even have written the story? I don't know. All I know is this. Sometimes it's best to just chill out and take people's advice. I'm still curious, but I always proceed with caution. You should too. To answer your questions, no, I never got a top clearance. I had to be bribed to ever go near that creek again, but I did eventually go back with my brothers, but never, ever on those days, and even in the heat of July, I just sat there while everyone else got in. I still enjoyed hanging out with everyone, but I did not look at them all the same. We only stayed there for 2 more years after that, but none of us will ever forget that strange little apartment building with the creek in the back. A little background to start. I work as a topographer/tracker for a local group in Colorado and Wyoming. My job consists of surveying areas and mapping out common game trails and popular places for herds to gather for hunting and ecological purposes. When I'm out, I'm mostly on an ATV until I find a game trail, which I then map out on foot. When I'm going long distances, I stop at outposts that have been set up along the trail to refuel and rest for the night or go to in case of hazardous weather. I've seen some things that have made me question what's out there, such as mutilated deer, bull elks torn in half, holes dug through the fresh body of animals from the inside out. While seeing things like this is unsettling, I usually shrug them off as some kind of nasty parasite or bear attack. The thing that made me wonder whether or not I was up against something much bigger didn't happen until recently while near the Wyoming/Colorado border in between outposts in the first week of December. To start, it was snowing fairly lightly, kinda spitting really. The pines stopped most of the snow falling on me while I was walking back to my ATV. While it was snowing lightly, the layer on the ground was at least a foot deep off trail, making it pretty difficult to move or be quiet while lumbering through it. I got on the ATV and drove about half a mile up the trail, almost crossing over into Wyoming, when I noticed another trail that looked freshly made. When I got off the ATV, I noticed some small droplets of blood in the snow going down the trail with what looked like bear prints with something dragging behind it. I grabbed my gun off the rack on the ATV and slung it over my shoulder. The trail looked fresh, but the prints and blood were starting to get covered in a layer of snowfall. While walking along the trail, I noticed something kind of weird in the middle of the bear tracks. It looked like a human foot almost, but rather elongated and thin, with only 4 toes on the end. The tracks twisted within the bear prints themselves, almost like the animal's foot spun a bit coming out of the bear track. I continued on while occasionally glancing into the track, and sure enough the prints were still there. When I go to the end in a large clearing, I stop following the bear tracks. Something about being in this large clearing with an unknown animal was making me uneasy. I mapped it out and placed a red line over it, indicating a high predatory area. On the way back, I noticed something strange about my own boot prints. Now, I'm a pretty big guy, standing at 6'2" with a size 13 boot, but whatever had made the tracks had a footprint significantly larger than my own. But that's not the worst part. Whatever it was had followed my boot prints back, heading in the same direction I was. Whatever it was, it had snuck behind me and was headed towards my ATV. I shouldered my rifle and put a round in the chamber. I walked back, glancing down every so often to see if the twisted footprints were indeed still in mine. When I got back to my ATV, I noticed that the prints circled my vehicle and stopped behind it and shuffled a bit. I then noticed that my jerry can was missing and that thing had left a trail of gasoline down the road from where I came. I hopped on my quad to get going in the opposite direction, hoping to distance myself from whatever stole my fuel. After crossing over into Wyoming, I noticed that everything was rather still. It was still snowing, but the flakes almost seemed to be suspended in the air. Not falling, but not static either. I could not hear anything when my ATV was shut off. No animals, no snowfall, not even my own breathing. Almost like something had stopped all sound from existing. I found another game trail, this time a few hundred yards off the trail. I dismounted and walked towards the opening in the trees, with pristine snow covering the rocky terrain around me. All along the trail, I would catch fleeting glimpses of a shadow. Not shadows, no, just one, moving along the trail with me. I put it off to lack of sleep, making me see things. On my way back, I got a chill up my spine. In my own boot prints were the same tracks I saw at the last trail. The same twisty, human-like print, but this time, something was touching the ground in front of them. A swipe here and there, almost like whatever it was tracking me by my scent. I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. I reached for my sidearm, kicking myself for leaving the rifle on the ATV. I heard a ragged breath from my left, like if you collapsed along on a deer. I drew and fired into the trees, striking an aspen and blowing a hole in its small frame. I saw nothing. No movement, no snowfall, no animal. I started getting the same feeling I was getting from the clearing and ran back to my quad. Whatever had been following me beat me there. I followed the tracks around my ATV like last time and stopped to see what it took next. It took my rifle. My rifle. A large rifle that would require something very large to carry it off in its mouth, or something with hands and the strength to carry it. I looked a little closer at the prints and found something I had missed every single time. Inside the footprints, right where the twist ended, I noticed 4 very long appendages peeking through the twisted snow. It looked like a monkey foot, but longer and more hand-like, but not quite enough to be human. I mounted and hit the throttle, spinning out a bit until I got traction and went shooting down the road. I was too low on fuel to go back to a main road where I could get help and was forced to go to my next outpost. When I arrived, the small cabin/hut-like structure looked so comforting and protective I almost cried. It had fuel for the quad, a safe place for me to sleep, and a radio for help. The sun was setting, and I was firing up the stove after starting the generator when my radio crackled and came to life. I jumped when I heard the static hiss. I ran over to the radio and requested an evac or an extra team for a safe escort. When asked why, I lied and said I was being hunted by a bear and lost my rifle on the trail. The voice on the other end scoffed, but obliged. My team would be there by morning. When I hung up the radio and started to get comfy and safe, I heard a loud thump hit my door. I froze in my bed, not knowing what to do. I finally got up after debating whether or not to just hide. I'm no coward, I thought. I grabbed my sidearm and walked towards the door. I peeked out the small window to see if someone or something was out there. All I saw was darkness. Stupidly, I opened the door and shouted, "If you don't leave, I'm going to kill you. You took one of my guns, but I still have the other." No response. I looked at my door to see what struck it, and only saw the remnants of a snowball. A fucking snowball. I waited to see if I could see any movement, when another snowball came flying out of the darkness to my left and hit my shoulder. "You better run, or I'm going to fucking kill you," I yelled as I slammed the door shut and ran out to confront whatever threw the snowball. I ran towards where the ball came from, watching for prints or signs of movement. I saw something in the darkness that looked like a man had fallen and was scrambling on the ground to get up, making that raspy breathing noise. I stopped and aimed, but saw that whatever was in front of me had continued to run on all fours at an alarming speed, faster than I could run. I froze when I saw the black silhouette dart off into the darkness, not sure what to do. After listening and hearing nothing, no breathing, no running, I headed back to my hut. Once I got to the clearing my hut was in, I stopped, relieved that I had made it out of the woods alive. I took a deep breath and calmed myself down and started walking towards my cabin, illuminated by the loom porch light on the deck. I looked down, trying to follow my tracks back to conserve energy, and nearly vomited. The twisted footprints were in my tracks, headed towards the cabin. I saw the trail heading back towards my cabin, each twisted footprint slamming down into my own until it got to my porch. Amidst all the snow dragged on by the thing was my rifle and jerry can, placed neatly on the porch, leaning against the wall. The door was jarred open a bit. I could have sworn I saw the leg of the thing dart in as soon as I looked at it. I wish I could say I bursted in there and shot the thing dead, but I was too frozen with fear to do anything but stand there. I wish I could say I was brave enough and fought the good fight, but I did not. I crumpled onto the ground, cradling my knees until sunup. I had spent 6 hours in the darkness, waiting for whatever that thing was to come out and finish me, but it never happened. My crew found me covered in snow with my gun drawn and pointed at my cabin. They questioned me and searched the cabin. All of my food was eaten. My bed was torn up and made into a makeshift nest thing like a dog would sleep in, and the radio was destroyed, but no sign of whatever was hunting me. I used to sort of work with this big, brawny Mexican guy named Augustin. I was driving trucks at the time and had some deliveries to a ranch that he worked at. We both got along really well, and sometimes Augustin would toss me a cut of nice meat. He had access to a bunch of it. One day, I saw him, and he seemed a little off, so I did not bug him, just made my delivery and left. Next time I see him, he is back to his normal self. I ask him what was up with him last time. He straight up asked me, "Do you believe in witches?" I tell him no. He says he doesn't either, but that in Mexico there is a belief that witches can assume the shape of animals. There is one that takes the shape of an owl. So, he tells me this story. According to him, he is working late one day. It is well after dark when he is leaving the ranch and headed down a small road, headed home, but he realizes he left something behind, so he turns around. About a minute later, he spots a lady walking along the side of the road very quickly. He is shocked to find a woman walking out alone so late, and she looks old, which makes it even stranger. Plus, he just drove down this road, coming the opposite way, and did not see anybody. It's like the old lady just appeared out of nowhere. But Augustin, being a good guy, is more concerned about the woman than anything else. He pulls up alongside her and rolls down his window. He asks if she needs a ride. The woman is wearing a dark shawl, so he cannot see her face, but she turns to look directly at him, and he sees that she has the face of a bird. At first, he thinks it's a mask, but he can see the feathers moving as she walks and everything. He hits the brakes and thinks, "What the fuck is that?" But when he looks around, the woman is gone. There is nothing but him and the empty road.